like, you know, let's be very generous and say 50 years ago, even though it's happening right now, um, maybe it was much more pronounced 50 years ago. Uh, was there a thing called marital rape? Right? No, it's your wife,
No.
right? And so,
Yeah.
guys were like that from their perspective, from that emic category internal to them, they're just having sex with their wife. That's
Yeah.
not considered rape, even if she didn't want it, right? She signed
Yeah.
up for it 10 years ago. So,
Right.
like,
Right.
but of course, from our perspective, looking back on that or across to that now,
Exactly. It's still happening.
yes, of course. Um, uh, it's clearly right because consent is required. Overwhelming, excited consent is required.
Yeah.
And so,
No scholar of sexual ethics argues that overwhelming, excited consent is required. Not one. However, Bowen appears to suggest that this extreme and unrealistic standard is necessary to avoid marital rape. Scholars have already raised concerns that the enthusiastic consent model sets too high a bar, yet Bowen seems to promote an even higher, overwhelming consent model, which is unheard of in the literature on sexual ethics. Even Dr. Jennifer Bird gave a skeptical look about this claim from Bowen.
um, uh, it's clearly right because consent is required. Overwhelming, excited consent is required.
Yeah.
And so,
So here are some reasons why overwhelming or enthusiastic consent should never be the standard required for consent. It might be a good standard, or as some have suggested, the gold standard, but it should never be the required standard of consent. And if Bowen agrees with these reasons or just misspoke, he should have made a comment about it and had it pinned in the video comment section. The book, The Principles of Pleasure, written by two sex therapists and published by Routledge, refutes the idea that the only sex that can be had is enthusiastic or overwhelming. Therapists understand that this is completely unrealistic for all couples. They promote that consent is a spectrum and that while enthusiastic consent is the ideal, it doesn't mean you can only have sex where enthusiastic consent was given. On page 158, they say, non-enthusiastic consent can manifest as discomfort, dislike, indifference, or I don't mind. Non-enthusiastic sex is not a negative experience in every situation. But if enthusiastic consent is the required standard of consent, then anything below that is a negative experience because it would be marital rape. Sexual intercourse in marriage without valid consent is marital rape. This is one of the biggest problems with the enthusiastic consent model in that it transforms non-enthusiastic but consensual sex into rape. This cheapens what rape really is and criminalizes normal sexual behavior. They continue. Many people in long-term relationships have maintenance sex, deciding to be sexual even though they are not feeling sexy, and feel just fine about it. Normalizing the experience of partners not being in the mood at the same time as their partner can sometimes help clients and students relax and take pressure off of themselves. If enthusiastic consent became a legal requirement, this could technically be illegal in cases where the element of enthusiasm is not present. This is one of the many reasons why enthusiastic or overwhelming consent is not and should not be required. Other reasons why the enthusiastic consent standard is illegitimate are listed on page 276 of the Palgrave Handbook of Sexual Ethics. The first reason is that fully valid consent can be given by people who are not all things considered eager to have sex with each other. For example, two people might decide to have sex without having much intrinsic desire for any particular activity, sexual or otherwise. For example, it may be that they live in an isolated location where there is nothing else to do. Perhaps the idea of having sex doesn't particularly thrill them, but they are thoroughly bored, and all the alternatives seem worse. This is unlikely to be the best sex of their lives, but assuming that they are appropriately responsive to each other's decisions, they would still be treating each other with proper respect and concern. So, even though they are not all things considered eager to have sex, their consent could still be fully valid. A similar point could be made about people who are mildly depressed, and hence not really enthusiastic about anything. And the same holds true of all the other instrumental reasons we looked at earlier. It may be that someone wants to have procreative sex because they or their partner are ovulating, even though they are tired and not particularly in the mood. As a result, they might marginally all things considered prefer to have sex, even though all things considered they are not enthusiastic about the prospect. This quote alone ends the discussion on enthusiastic consent. No rational person can believe that this standard can be a requirement for sex after reading this. Anyone still promoting this model is either not a serious thinker or is just looking for virtue signaling points.